What is Riot thinking with these Teemo buffs? And is Lux actually a top tier mid laner now? This and so much more as we bring you guys the 11.21 tier list update thanks to the help of our challenger players and analysis of the most recent data. So let's jump in. Ingenious Hunter has been a rather niche rune throughout Season 11, but Riot's looking to change that for 11.21. Base item haste is going from 10 to 20, while the item haste per stack is up from 5 to 6. With Ravenous Hunter also nerfed, which we'll cover after this change, Ingenious looks like it's a really interesting option now. On ADCs who build Gale Force like Jhin, being able to chop the cooldown of the active will feel really nice. If our math is correct, max stacks of Ingenious Hunter will reduce Gale Force CD from 90 to 60 seconds. Jhin's best build right now is actually Ghostblade into Gale Force, so with two actives, Ingenious will be even more valuable. This is a great indirect buff to Predator users and especially Galio. Galio's first core item is always one of Everfrost or a Rocket Belt, and combined with the Predator active, you get lots of benefit out of the Ingenious buffs. Overall, don't sleep on Ingenious for 11.21 as we expect the rune to be an optimal pickup on many champions. As for the Ravenous Hunter nerfs, Omnivamp per stack drops from 1.5 to 1.2%. So in total, if we do the math, you're losing 0.3% per 5 stacks, which equates to a 1.5% loss at max stacks. On many champions who have the ability to run Resolve secondary, we expect them to shy away from Domination now. For example, about 30% of Yone players run Domination secondary with Ravenous and Taste of Blood, but Resolve will take over as the clear winner for 11.21. For someone like Vayne, who almost exclusively runs Domination secondary in 11.20, she'll begin performing much better with Inspiration. Like we mentioned, any champs who can find good use out of Ingenious Hunter will ditch Ravenous now. Next up, we have the Health Rune Stat Shard, which will be buffed going from 15 scaling to 90 up to 15 scaling to 140 health. For champions who have multiple health scaling ratios in their kits, like Dr. Mundo or Tom Kench, the Health Rune will become more valuable than Magic Resist or Armor. For example, stat-wise in 11.20, the Health Shard already has a better win rate on Mundo than Armor or Magic Resist, so the buff solidifies it as a great option. Sion is another pick you should be looking to run the Health Shard on, as his W scales with health, and it's even buffed for 11.20, which we will have a look at in a bit. On champions that don't have any sort of health scaling, we expect the Armor and Magic Resist runes to remain the more optimal choices. Although Guardian remains very underrated in solo queue on many champions, its strength is very high, so Riot is nerfing the rune for 11.21. Shield is dropping from 70 scaling to 150 down to 50 scaling to 130. For Thresh and Blitz, who can perform just as well with Aftershock, look to swap things around depending on the matchup now. If you're laning against a melee support where you'll be able to proc Aftershock more reliably early on, it's a great option. In double range matchups or against an aggro duo, running Guardian to provide your carry with more durability will remain a good choice despite the nerf. 20 shielding is a big hit, so Guardian won't be the #1 option for all games. This is a good thing though, as it rewards players who can adapt and pick which rune fits best for the situation. These next set of changes are targeted towards Bruiser tops, and Conqueror is first up. Adaptive damage per stack will be lowered from 2 scaling to 5 down to 2 scaling to 4. The buff duration is taking a big hit, going from 6 to 4 seconds. This nerf will hit spellcasting bruisers a lot harder than auto-reliant picks. For example, Aatrox often wants to play around Q cooldown to maximize trading potential, and at max rank Q is on a 6-second cooldown. With the buff duration on Conqueror being 6 seconds, this has enabled perfect synergy in previous patches. Of course, with some CDR, Aatrox Q will drop lower than 6 seconds, but now that buff duration on Conqueror is only 4 seconds, it's a fine line as to whether you'll be able to keep up the stacks as you're waiting on QCD. We don't expect Conqueror to be phased out on many Bruiser picks, but they'll all take a substantial indirect hit for 11.21. The second Bruiser nerf is to Gore Drinker, as the active damage is changed from 100% total AD to 175% base AD. Health per 5 and Spite passive are being completely removed. To compensate, you'll now receive 8% Omnivamp. Aatrox mains really can't catch a break, as Conqueror and Gore Changes are indirect nerfs. Another champ who will feel the effects of these nerfs the most is Fiora. For champs like Set and Darius who don't heavily rely on Gore Drinker, they'll be hit slightly less, but still become indirectly weaker. For assassins like Talon, Zed, and Kiana, who have been abusing Bruiser setups, they can go back to more offensive builds, which is how it should be. Final item change we have for 11.21 goes the way of Stride Breaker, as active damage will be changed from 100% total AD to 175% base AD. Stride AD will be increased from 45 to 50. This will end up a buff in the earlier stages where you don't have a ton of total AD, but later on with a couple damage items, it turns into a nerf. Net outcome of the change is a buff for most situations, as the extra damage early on will help you secure more kills and hit your core items faster, to where less late game damage on Stride isn't a huge issue. Alterations of Stride won't lead to a major shift in the champions who build the item. The change that has the majority of the player base up in arms for 11.21 are the Teemo buffs. Q cooldown is lowered from 8 to 7 seconds. Q blind duration is increased by 0.5 seconds at all ranks. And to top it off, Q missile speed is going from 1500 up to 2500. This means that at max rank, Teemo blind will last 3 seconds and be on a 6-second cooldown if you've got some haste. Enemies that rely on auto damage will have less than a 3-second window to punish you, and if you're kiting around shrooms and using W move speed at the correct time, the window is nearly non-existent. Into picks like Tryndamere, Camille, Fiora, and Darius, Teemo will be a godlike counter for 11.21. All those champs are picked at very high rates in the meta, so it makes Teemo even more valuable. As a result, the Swift Scout makes his way into S tier for the first time this season. Sion is one of the biggest winners of 11.21 thanks to a W buff along with the health rune buff we touched on earlier. W shield ratio is being increased from 8 scaling to 12% max health up to 11 scaling to 15% max health. The standard Sion build is a Sunfire Rush into Hullbreaker 2nd and Titanic Hydra 3rd, which synergizes insanely well with the buff. If we run down a couple calculations here to get an idea of how impactful the buff will be, let's say Sion is level 14 with those 3 items. You'll have a total of 2,677 HP. W will be fully maxed, giving you the 15% scaling, which equates to a 400 health shield. The 11.20 W with only 12% max health scaling gives you a 320 HP shield. So around 80 extra shielding. That's pretty massive, especially for a spell that takes no skill to use. With other bruiser tops being hit in 11.21 combined with these direct buffs, Sion will be eating really nice and make his way back up into A tier. So it turns out a Rioter lost to Quinn in solo queue, which means a nerf is now warranted for 11.21. We're not even kidding about the Rioter either, as Quinn AD, who's a Quinn one-trick, posted a screenshot on Twitter of a Rioter losing to Quinn in solo queue. Although we hope this is not the reason for the nerf, why else would Quinn be targeted? Champion holds a 1% play rate, so the only ones playing Quinn are one-tricks. Quinn does have a high win rate at around 52%, but it's nothing out of this world for a champ with such a low play rate. Nevertheless, W bonus attack speed will be lowered from 20 scaling to 80% down to 20 scaling to 60%. Pretty big hit to the W max we see so frequently on Quinn, which means a Q max may become more viable now for 11.21. Although the nerf is rather odd, we don't see it altering Quinn's strength too much, so she will retain her spot in S for this patch. With all the top lane changes covered, let's run down the tier list. Bruisers are the biggest losers of the patch, with Aatrox and Fiora dropping out of S tier. Champions who don't rely on Gore Drinker, Ravenous Hunter, and Conqueror will see a nice indirect boost. For this reason, Camille now joins Tahm Kench in OP tier. Camille is one of the few bruisers who doesn't need Gore or Conqueror, so she'll be moving back up. Tahm only becomes more oppressive as none of his items or runes were nerfed for 11.21, so the champ will be super nuts as if he wasn't already. Watch out for Poppy to rise drastically in priority. She was already directly buffed, and with so many bruisers falling in power, it's the perfect recipe for Poppy to thrive. After months of dominating the top lane meta, Set is going to fall out of OP tier and drop into S. Top 3 low elo recommendations are Urgot, Yorick, and Lilia. Teemo, Darius, and TK are very high value bans for the current meta. For our question of the day, we have to ask you guys what your thoughts are on the Teemo buffs. Are we overestimating the changes, or are they as crazy as they seem? Let us know what you guys think down in the comments below. A few buffs to further incentivize a more offensive build for Viego are set to drop this patch. Q total AD ratio is going from 60 to 70%. W self slow will be lowered from 15 to 10%. Ultimate crit ratio is increased from 75 to 100%. For those of you who continue to build Divine Sunderer every game on Viego, it's time to stop. Shield Bow already outperforms Divine in most situations for 11.20, and with these buffs, it only becomes stronger. As long as players build Viego correctly, we see him back in a good spot as an A tier option. Graves E armor is nerfed this patch, dropping from 6 scaling to 18 down to 4 scaling to 16. Keep in mind, this is the armor per stack, which caps off at 8 stacks. If you're able to reach these max 8 stacks, then you're losing a total of 16 armor. Definitely nothing to scoff at, as you're slashed about 300 gold worth of stats, considering cloth armor provides you with 15 armor and is worth 300 gold. Will this nerf drop Graves out of meta though? Not likely. Graves will move from S into A tier, but remain a good carry option if you can pilot him well. So just 2 direct changes to jungle, which means the meta looks very similar to 11.20. Kha'Zix will reign supreme as Xin Zhao shifts down to S tier as a result of the Gore Drinker and Conqueror nerfs. If you're a Jarvan main, I would be pretty frustrated with Riot right now. Not only was J4 directly nerfed, but now his core item and Keystone Rune is hit, which is just the classic, ain't it? Watch out for AP junglers in 11.21 as they'll see an indirect boost in strength with many bruiser picks becoming weaker. We'll keep a close eye and monitor how the item and rune nerfs affect the jungle meta and make adjustments accordingly, but for now, Xin and J4 will be the only champions moved down the list. Certain junglers like Kayn, who have abused Gore and Conqueror but have other options to lean on, means the effect of the nerfs won't be as harsh. J4 and Xin don't have as strong alternatives, so their power will be chopped the most. To climb low elo fastest, we would advise you to spam one of Amumu, Trundle, or Fiddle. High on the ban list this patch should be Xin Zhao, Echo, and Kha'Zix. Some of the biggest buffs we've seen to a single champion in a while are penciled in for Lux. Attack speed per level is doubled from 1 to 2%. Passive mark duration will now extend if a basic attack is in flight or R is being cast. E-based damage will be increased by 10 at all ranks, while the AP ratio goes from 65 to 70%. Lastly, ultimate cooldown is being lowered from 80 to 60 seconds at rank 1. The attack speed buff may not seem like a big deal, but it will make a considerable impact when you're going for passive procs. Ultimate buff is amazing as the cooldown is already quite low, so 20 seconds off at rank 1 will really enhance Lux's snowball power and ability to perma-shove waves. All changes in mind, Lux will be moving up 1 tier from A into S for 11.21. Uxin E Max will take a big hit this patch as the damage at rank 5 is lowered from 110 down to 90. Keep in mind, this is damage per shot and not total damage. This means you'll be losing way more than 20 damage. Just take a look at the background gameplay to get a comparison. 1,596 damage in 11.20 compared to 1,411 in 11.21, which is a massive difference. We definitely think this seals the deal in regards to Q Max being more optimal moving forward. The win rate between Q and E Max have been identical in previous patches, so with such a big nerf to E, Q will become the better option. Uxin will no longer lock down an OP tier slot, as we'll be shifting the Rogue Sentinel down to S. Our complete mid lane tier list will feature Vex as the standalone best carry pick for solo queue. Below her in S tier are lots of great options, but really watch out for Galio as the Ingenious Hunter buff will offer added strength. Singed mid is another who runs Predator and rushes an active item, so he'll be liking the rune changes too. Bruiser Talon will become weaker for 11.21, but that doesn't mean his overall power level will drop off much. You can still run Ghostblade into Prowlers on Talon to a ton of success, so his tier list placement won't be altered due to Gore and Conqueror nerfs. Darius is popping off as a mid lane pick after his recent W buff, so if you're in need of answer to picks like Kassadin, Yone, and Yasuo, look no further. Our top 3 low elo picks for mid lane are Malzahar, Annie, and Darius. A couple ban-worthy champs for 11.21 are Vex, Zed, and Uxin. Riot has buffed Xayah multiple times this season to no avail, so another couple changes are planned for 11.21. Base move speed is going from 325 up to 330. Q cooldown will be lowered at the latter ranks, going from 10 scaling to 6 seconds down to 10 scaling to 4 seconds. Pretty underwhelming changes, to be honest, as the Q buff doesn't even come into effect until level 14 as you max Q out last. Sure, level 18 it shaves 2 seconds off Q, but how often do you even reach that point? Very, very little. Movement speed buff will be the more impactful change, but even then, not enough to turn Xayah into a meta pick. Xayah will be moving into A tier for 11.21 as a good option, but nothing special as there are still better champs above her. So, in a definitively stronger state than Xayah right now, Jinx will receive the more impactful buffs. Passive total attack speed is increased from 15 to 25%. E-cast range is going from 900 to 925. Ultimate cooldown will be lowered from 90 scaling to 60 seconds down to 75 scaling to 55 seconds. We're eyeing down the ultimate buff as the big one here. 15 seconds off at rank 1 is really big, as Jinx ultimate is an ability you can spam off cooldown when paired with an aggressive support. Another free 10% attack speed on passive will enable Jinx to clean up fights even better than before. Jinx climbs back into S tier as one of the best solo carry options moving forward. Without a doubt, one of the most broken champs in general over the past few patches has been Misfortune, so she's rightfully nerfed for 11.21. Base mana drops from 325 down to 300, while W mana cost is going from 30 to 45. If anything, all these changes do is incentivize the Manamune build, but won't alter MF's power level very much. Manamune builds are performing just as well as anything else for 11.20, so if you do find yourself running into mana issues, swapping over to the setup is completely viable. MF will hold on to her OP tier slot and continue to dominate as one of the best carry marksmen. We already saw Quinn nerfed earlier, which was a bit of an oddball decision, and now Karthus bot lane is being focused. Don't get us wrong, our analysts have had Karthus rated as an S tier pick for bot lane, but his play rate sits below 1%, so why nerf a champ that nobody plays? E-mana refund is going from 20 scaling to 48, down to 15 scaling to 55. A nerf to Karthus' laning power and a negligible buff for later on. Overall, our analysts don't see this change being impactful at all, so Karthus will continue to hold down an S tier spot. Alright, the bot lane tier list will consist of Misfortune, Vayne, and Jhin as the highest priority picks to climb. Don't sleep on Jinx after the buffs, as she moves into S tier as a really great pickup. Pair Jinx with Blitz, who's one of the strongest supports in meta, and you have a really nutty 2v2 kill lane. Like we touched on earlier, experiment with Ingenious Hunter instead of Ravenous on picks like Jhin, Tristana, and Twitch. All do very well with Gale Force, and the Ingenious buffs lowering the active cooldown will do wonders for your survivability and pick power. Ravenous Hunter nerfs also open things up for Inspiration to take over on certain picks like Vayne and Xayah. Our top 3 low elo picks of the patch are Ziggs, Misfortune, and Ashe. Highest value bans for the bot lane meta are Vayne, MF, and Draven. Why does it feel like every other patch, support mains are left cut out to dry without a single change? Well, that's the case for 11.21, as we have no changes to report unless you count the Lux buffs. To be honest, Lux support will benefit just as much as mid lane from these changes, so if you are a Lux support main, things are looking up. Lux finds a spot in A tier for 11.21 as a good, reliable pickup. Other than that, Nami, Soraka, Blitz, and Amumu lead the way as the most broken picks to climb with. Look towards one of Soraka, Blitz, or Zyra if you want to make your way out of low elo the fastest. Amumu, Blitzcrank, or Soraka are high priority bans this patch. Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little more about SkillCapped. So, we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week, with over 1,600 guides curated into over 100 courses no one can compare. We've also sent challenger players into Elo Hell 714 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $4.99 a month if you are serious about improving. So that concludes the SkillCapped 11.21 tier list update. We hope this helps to give you guys a solid grasp of where the meta is headed moving forward. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you back soon.